Hello and welcome to the latest edition of What Does the Giraffe Say with me, Kathleen Retourne. We are an organisation that tries to reconnect people with their audiences by holding live interviews on conservation. Today I am very happy to be joined by Lionel de Lange, and he is the founder for Warriors of Wildlife. So Lionel, if I could just hand over to you, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and about how this organisation began life.
Okay, hi Kathleen, thanks for having me and putting this together. I really appreciate it. So my name is Lionel. I live in Ukraine. I'm a South African. I moved here a few years ago. I'd never ever been involved in anything like this before. But in 2014, when the ex-president of Ukraine was ousted, President Yanukovych, the government collapsed and there was no funding for zoos and animal shelters. All non-essential services funding was cut. And I saw a message in the local news that our zoo in the city that I was living in was running out of food. And I thought, well, what can I do to help? I don't like zoos at all. I don't think there should be, but that's another story. And I just thought, well, what can we do? And that's where it started, you know. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of people to try and help on Facebook. And it sounds like a scam. Here's the South African in Ukraine saying, please send me money, I want to feed some zoo animals. So I had to align myself with someone credible. And I remembered, and I had followed all the work that Lawrence Anthony had done with the elephants and with the animals that were rescued in Baghdad when Iraq was invaded. And I reached out to them to say, you know, what can you guys do to help these animals that are starving? Anyway, they sent me a questionnaire and they said, could you just check a couple of things out? And so off I went, and a day later, I was signing a contract to become a director of my own chapter in Ukraine. And that's how it started. And I thought, well, we would just feed a couple of animals and that would be it. And then it just blew up from there. We've done so many animal rescues. We're going to be taking our 18th lion to South Africa as soon as COVID lifts and we're allowed to travel in. We've got another 7 waiting in the wings. Bears, God, how many have I rescued? We've got 2 now waiting to go to Romania, and we're hoping to travel by road with them to Romania next month. We've already sent 2 to Romania. We've worked with the local government at their sanctuary, rescuing bears and helping bears with medical procedures, dentistry, sterilization, food, buy them fencing, radio. So we've got very, very involved, and we've done a lot since 2014 when we first started. And that's how we got to where we are. It was just some animals in a zoo that were hungry and I couldn't let it go.
I mean, you mentioned there the Lawrence Anthony. Now, what was the inspiration with him there? I know I've read several of his books. I'm very passionate about what he was doing in his organization. How was you aware of that? And then how did that inspire you?
Well, Lawrence Anthony is South African, and the elephant whisperer. That's where I first came to know about the work that he did, was through the work that he did with the elephants. And I always thought, wow, you know, that's like really amazing what this guy's doing. And then the whole Iraq story with the animals in Baghdad and how he went in there, he just decided. I only found out afterwards how he did the whole thing, you know, by speaking to the directors of the Lawrence Anthony Earth Organization. And he just did it. He went in there without a plan and he just got it done. And that was like really amazing for me. I'm also one of those go-getters. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And yeah, and then I thought, you know, who better to align myself with than the Lawrence Anthony Earth Organization? And we worked together for a number of years. Up until last year, I registered my own organization because I needed to have my own NGO with my own charity registration and registration numbers. So it was easier for me and better for me to do that. And that's why we left. We're still on good terms. We chat nearly every day. So yeah, that's how I did it.
I mean, for anyone watching back home, I would thoroughly recommend reading some of the books because they're
absolutely
really interesting and so inspiring. So then with the animals, how do you find out about the animals that need to be rescued? And is there like a typical process that you go through to then start the work?
Okay, so every rescue is completely different. We never know what we're going to walk into. So, for example, our first lion rescue, the first lion relocation we did to Port Elizabeth in South Africa in 2018, we had got a call from an activist in the northwest of Ukraine in a little town called Sambir, near Lvov, to say there are 3 bears living in really bad conditions. Can we help? No mention of any lions. Bears seem to be a bigger story, a bigger concern up here than lions are. Possibly because they are registered in the Red Book, so they're an endangered species in Ukraine. But if you cross the border into Romania, they're not, and so anyway, so it is a concern for them. But so they called us for these 3 bears. It sounds like Goldilocks. Anyway, so off we went, and we met with the owner first, and we were walking over, and we had seen the bears, and we were walking over, and I smelt this disgusting smell. And these were the lions. I actually smelt them before I saw them. There were 3 of them living in the size of a single garage. Their doors were even welded shut. And so they were living in their own feces and urine and leftover food until it dried. And the dirt actually just packed up. So we were called about that one. And we negotiated the release of the bears. He hadn't decided he was going to give them to us. It was like, can we do this thing? Do you want to do it? Are you happy to do it? He was hesitant. It got a bit confrontational. Voices were raised. And then the wife, Anya, very much part of the organization, obviously does all the translation for us, had to step in and calm me down and calm him down. And we reached an agreement that we would move these bears. So as we were walking over to the enclosures, the lions and the smell, and I saw them, and I said to Anya, we got to take them. And she said, let's wait, just wait. Let's get the bears onto the truck. Let's get them in their travel crates, get them on the truck, and we leave. When the bears were on the truck and we were pulling out, I said to Anya, let's go and speak to him. And we went over and he said, can we have the lions? And the activists that were with us laughed because they said, what are you going to do with them? I said, I'll take them to South Africa. I hadn't even planned this. I hadn't thought. I didn't know where I was going to put them. I didn't know what it was going to cost. I just said, we can't leave them here. And he said, okay. And he was like, that was an easy one. We've got others where the ones we're doing now, it took us 20 months to get the documentation to have the animals released into our name. There were court cases. There were police involved. There's another guy we fight with regularly. He's a big animal breeder and trader, ex-circus trainer. He's tried to flatten me with his car. He's been after me with his car. We've had to call the police in. He won't give up anything. We went there. He agreed to give us 2 bears. And then at the last minute changed his mind. We've lost a couple of animals in rescues where we've agreed to take them. And then when we rock up to fetch them, they're no longer there. And that still bothers me. One little bear, she was about 5 years old. Her name was Monya. That was 4 years ago. And that still bugs me because we got there to fetch her and everything had been wiped out. The cage was even gone. There was new gravel put down in place of where this, and it freaked me out. And there was no bear here. What are you talking about, So, yeah, we don't get them all, but we try hard. So some of them are easy, some are cool, some we know about. We know who the traders and the breeders are. We try not to take animals away from breeders because that's just giving them space to make more, and we don't want to help them with their business. But it's also very difficult when you see an animal in distress like that to just leave them there.
And then what's the process then? So you mentioned that you have, and I've been following you closely on Facebook, and I've seen that you have had some releases where you've taken animals to South Africa, for example. I mean, that's got to be some hell of a process, right?
Ooh.
Taking an animal and flying it into another country and all the stuff that goes alongside that.
Yeah, the easiest one we did for the lions, moving them from Ukraine to South Africa, the process took around 8 months. That was that was an easy one. The ones that we're flying now, it's been 20 months. Actually, it'll be 21 months now, this month, and we haven't left yet. But so once we've got the animals in our possession, we then need to make sure their history, where they come from. We've got to apply for CITES permits, an export permit to get them out of the country. And then South Africa has to apply for an import to get them in. But all the work really happens here. So we have to prove origin. Where do they come from? And we can't always do that because people don't want to say where their lions or their bears or their wolves come from because it's all illegal. So that's a bit of a process. If all goes according to plan, you should be able to get your CITES permits within 4 to 6 weeks on our end, and then South Africa will do their end. And once that's in place, then we can start doing veterinary certificates. We start looking for flights and do all that. But in general, it takes us around a year to do a batch of lions at a time. Lots of bureaucracy. CITES is a really, and I'm sure if there are any other conservation people listening to that, they're like a law unto their own. You know, they'll find every reason not to let the animal go. It's not the easiest thing in the world to work with them, but I suppose they're just following all their protocols, and I think their protocols need to be re-looked at, because there are animals that have been, and I'm not talking about Ukraine, but especially South Africa, the animals that are being sent out of South Africa that are on the endangered species list that shouldn't be going, but they're getting permits to let them go. Why is that allowed to happen? So, yeah, not easy, but it takes a while, just a lot of paperwork, and you've got to make sure that you cross your T's and dot your I's because they'll get you on that.
Yeah.
And then it's obviously the long process is the funding. If I can just put it in let's take 4 lions, and it normally takes us around 8 months to a year to get them out, including flights, internal transport, vets, no emergency issues, nothing out of the ordinary cropping up. You're looking at around $25,000. That's with flights, with food to care for them for the year, internal transport, our flights to go with them, food. What else is there? Yeah, then we've also got to do all the chip, all the blood work, sterilizations. So you're around 8 months to a year, you're in for about $25,000.
And then how do you get the support for that? Is it a lot of time big corporations, or how do you generate that?
Yeah, so most of it's private donors. I get onto Facebook, and when I was born, or brought up, not when I was born, while I was growing up, my dad made me work hard for my pocket money, for my allowance every week. So I was taught the value of money, and there were never, ever any handouts. So it's very difficult still to me, even though I've been doing this now, asking for donations for 6 years, it's still very, very difficult for me. Every time I write a post, I think, God, I've got to ask people for money. And that's just not who I am, But without donors' trust and support, and people around the world, they don't trust us with their money and don't give us their support, we'd never, ever be able to do what we do.
Mm-hmm. And then what I was interested in as well, because you touched on it earlier, that you can't save them all. And you're seeing some harrowing things, and you're seeing some of the worst of humanity in some ways with the way these animals are being kept. How do you remain positive, and how do you keep that hope? And what would you say to others who are kind of feeling a bit desperate and need a bit of positivity to keep them going?
Geez, that's a difficult one, because I have quite a bad temper. I do. I'm not the easiest person in the world to work with. And if I know that something is wrong, I really battle to deal with it, and I'll lose it sometimes. But we can't save them all, and it's easy to sit here and say that, oh, you know what, we can't save them all, but we'll get the next one. Every one that we don't get affects us really badly. We've got these 18 lions now with the 7 to follow. So we've done so it's 7, it's 25 lions we've rescued. We've relocated 13 with the 5 about to follow now. And we've had one fatality and with a lion, no fault of ours. He was little Nathan, you know, and we've honored him in some way by registering our new organization in Ukraine, calling it Charity Organization Nathan. We got him to South Africa. He also came from a very bad guy. We actually had to, God, it wasn't smuggled because I don't want the authorities, but to get him off of the owner, we had other people who had to go and say the lion is for them and they would like it as a gift. And he gave it to them and then the ownership was transferred to us. So he hates us for that. But we lost Nathan, you know, he was killed in a fight in South Africa with the other lions that went out. And that stays with us all the time. Like I spoke about that little bear Monya, we remember all those things, you know. So it's not easy to stay positive, but you must always remember, just there's so many more out there that need our help. At least if you've lost one, at least you know you've tried. As long as you've tried your hardest, you've tried, you know, and there's not much more you can do. And then to stay positive, Anya really, she calms me down and builds me back up and says, don't worry, we'll get it again. But it affects her as well, you know. She's a tough lady, and she really fights for these animals as well.
And then how have you found being able to cope at the minute with the fact that there's so many restrictions because of COVID? And then are people unable to donate as much because money's tight, people aren't working as much? Has there been any implications for you? Yes,
COVID has affected us in a big way. Donations have dropped off around 80%. It's been really difficult. Our last two, just let's go back. I need to mention, you spoke about donors. Mazda South Africa, Mazda Foundation South Africa helped us in a big way with the last couple of rescues. They supplied vehicles and they supplied some funding. They were our only really big sponsor. Turkish Airlines has given us a really small discount on flights, but nothing that really helps. But this year, this whole COVID thing has been really difficult, and we understand that people just don't have money. But I can't go to the Lions and say, sorry, pal, there's no food for you today because no one's donated, or to the bear who needs some dentistry or needs to be sterilized. We've just got to make a plan and fund it. Fortunately, I have my own business, which makes us money to live, but I have to sometimes dip into that too. I sound like a pauper and like I'm begging again. I hate this. But anyway, that's what it's all about, you know. We've got to, we make a commitment to these animals. We can't just turn around and walk away, you know. So, yeah, not easy. COVID has really messed up everything. And the longer we stay, okay, so here's another issue with these lions. So we need to get them to South Africa so that they can get out into the enclosure and run around and have a bigger space. So they're in holding enclosures at the moment, not very big, but a lot bigger than they had. Some of the cats that are coming out now, Cecil, Luke is already there. We were lucky we got him out and he was in South Africa already. They were living in a 1.5 by 1.5 travel crate, 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters. That's how they were living in the elephants with an open side. If you look at my Facebook page, you'll see some pictures of cats in a little, and that's how they lived. So they're living better now and they're getting good food. They're not starving, and we're trying to make them as healthy as they can. But the longer we keep them here, so when we plan to fly them, we thought we would be in South Africa already with these 5, but because of COVID, we're not. So our budget that we planned on ended on the 20th of July because we wanted to fly end of July. So now we've got all these extra months, the extra costs of feeding. And if, let's hope nothing goes wrong, we don't need any medical stuff done. And that causes an issue. The same as the 2 bears we're about to take to Romania. We wanted to get them there earlier this year already, but because of COVID and because of the restrictions in Romania and obviously travel restrictions, we also been restricted with that. So everything gets just so much more expensive with even less funding coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that. But you're right, because when you're planning your relocations, you wouldn't have budgeted for all this extra time that you're having
Yeah.
to feed and look after them. So yeah, there's huge knock-on impacts that go through.
And if we don't get out before winter really sets in, we then have to spend even extra money on keeping them warm for winter. So it's all just, it adds up and adds up. So we're hoping that our president is going to open international travel for us soon, and then we can go.
Yeah.
We're hoping. And it's also better for us to travel in autumn than even now, because it's been really hot. So it's not good to travel with animals right now. So in autumn would be a good time to travel. Winter, it starts getting dangerous because you got to knock down the cats to load them, and to sedate them in -10, -11, -15 is not good. And then obviously the danger on the road, the long road trip all the way from where we're holding them to the airport. So all those things come into play. And then the transport gets more expensive when it's winter as well. So our internal transport also increases because of the ice on the roads. Oh, anything to make a buck. But anyway, that's what the rescue relocation is all about.
Yeah. Okay, well, I've got one more question left. But also back home, if you're watching, please do feel free to comment. We've had lots of lovely comments coming through so far. A lot of people saying that the work you're doing is incredible, and there's a lot of respect for what you're doing. So you are being appreciated. But if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, if you'd like to hear any more about the animals or anything along those lines, then just pop it in the comments section and I will have a look and put it to Lionel. And if you're watching this later, so it's not live, do feel free to again put a question towards him and we'll be able to respond to that at a later date for you.
Absolutely.
So Lionel, basically I wanted to find out, since you've been doing all this work, have you got a favorite success story that really stands out for you?
Every animal that we know has got a better life is good for us. But we spoke about the 3 bears earlier. There was a bear there. His name was Burry. He was this big brown bear. Well, they are brown bears, but he was very light in color. You'll actually see on my Facebook page a picture of a bear rubbing up against a tree or a tree stump. He had spent his whole life in this small enclosure. I don't even think it was 30 square meters for a big brown bear like that. All concrete, roof over his head, so he never ever felt the snow or the rain or anything on him. When we released him, we actually did that rescue at the beginning of winter 2017, December 2017. The snow hadn't really come yet. The day we picked them up and we put them on the truck, it started snowing the next day. So when we got them to the rehabilitation center in Sinevere in the Carpathian Mountains, there's a bear rehab center. It belongs to the government, but we do some work with them. He went into quarantine for a while, just so they can get used to their surroundings, because I call it cell syndrome. So these animals are locked in small enclosures. You open the door, they don't know what to do. They're terrified. So anyway, we dropped him off. We went home for a month. He was in his quarantine area, and we came back and they said, okay, we're going to let him out today. And it was snowing. It was great. It was beautiful. We're in the mountains. And they open this door and he sticks his head out and he steps back and he puts his head out and because he doesn't know what's going on. Eventually he gets out and you can see him, or he puts his paw down into the snow softly, because he doesn't know what that white stuff is. He's only ever seen it out of his cage, but he's never felt it. And then when he eventually got out into it, he kept on looking up at the sky because he couldn't understand that there was nothing above his head and what all this white fluffy stuff was falling on him. It sounds like I'm making up a story, but if you go and look at my Facebook page, you can see the video. In fact, Unilad picked up the video and we got like nearly 3 million views of just Burry and how he reacted to being free. And then the bear that was with him, Boris, he was too scared to walk. It would take him around a minute to take a step because he was too scared to put his paw down into that white stuff. But once they realized that it's cool, it's really amazing to see. And then also the lions, you know, this last lion, we took out Luke to Love Lions Alive in South Africa. It's probably the best sanctuary in South Africa. He also came from a very, very bad place. And he's now found love, you know. He went out and immediately he changed and he became a lion, you know. And he found love with another lion that came from somewhere in South Africa, and they watched him for a while and then they eventually put them together, and it's like a huge love story. It's really cool. So those are probably our two favorites.
So you're saying that you're a grumpy old man, but you've got a soft heart, really.
I love animals, and please, with all respect to all our donors and people that help us, I don't like people. I really don't. I'll spend the rest of my life with animals and I'll be quite happy. I can't handle seeing any sort of animal abuse or an animal suffering in any way, shape or form. Yeah. But yeah, I am grumpy.
I got a comment from Mark Eastbrook, and he's asking, do you have government support or law enforcement support when you're going to location to move the animals?
Absolutely nothing. The problem with, and I don't want to upset the authorities, but the problem is that the laws are not strong enough here. And then if we do get the police involved, if we can't get the animal from the owner themselves, okay, and he doesn't agree to eventually give it up, and we do bring the authorities in, we sit in a situation where we've just been in now, where these lions have been tied up in a court case for 20 months, you know, and then you can't move them. If there were no authorities involved and this guy had agreed to, if we had put enough pressure on him, he may have agreed to give us the lions, signed them over to us with proper contracts. We could have had them out the country a year ago. So we can call the police, they'll come along, they'll do what they have to do, but then you've got to wait. Then you walk away and you leave the animal there and you see if the authorities and the courts will do anything. So it's better if the guy gives it up, apply the pressure, bring the press, give him a hard time on Facebook, get someone knocking on his door every day. And if he gives it up voluntarily, that's great. We've been offered, we've had guys, pay me 10,000 grivna, you can take the bear. I refuse to do that. We're not animal traders. Once you pay one guy, or you pay him once, he's going to be phoning you every week. I've got a new animal. Here's the money. I want money. So definitely a no-no.
Okay, well, that's everything that we've got so far. Thank you, everyone. We've had some really nice comments. So yeah, have a look through and see there's a lot of support for what you guys are doing. And is there anything you want to finish up with, Lionel?
Yeah, you know, like I said, I don't like asking for it, but we really do need the support, especially this year. You guys can go to our Facebook page or our website. There's a donation link there, you know, $5, $10, it all adds up. And then one thing that has happened, if you go to Amazon, there's a book called Lockdown Luke. It's a true story about Luke, of where he came from. And obviously it's been with, what do you call it? Poetic license, you know, whatever the word, things have been changed a little bit. But the basic story about him is true. It's great for kids. I read it and it gave me goosebumps. I know some adults had read it and made them cry because it's such a cool story. The illustrations are great, the pictures are great, and the story is great, and it's true. And it's called Lockdown Luke, and it's written by Lulu and T. And every one you buy, we get a couple of cents from. We get 22 American cents for every book that you buy. Not a lot, so go out and buy 10 or 20,000 if you can.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. It's been a really interesting chat. And again, as I say, if you have any more comments back home, do pop them on. It's always good to see them and also to hear the support too. But yeah, for now, thank you very much for tuning in, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Kathleen, for having us. Really appreciate it, and for doing this not only for us, but for everyone else that is out there doing this kind of work. And thanks to all our supporters.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, bye now.